Hey, this is Jonathan Gilliam. I'm about to start the show, and I just wanted to thank everyone real quick for listening to this show and participating in it, because I get all your feedback on all the social media platforms and helping me get the word out to all the people in this country, conservative or liberal. I really don't think that most people understand what those two terms mean and how they're used to guide them down roads that they may not actually agree with. The reality is I am conservative, and this is a conservative-leaning show, but my definition of conservative is simple: slow to change and looking at the fundamentals of how we can fix or keep all those things that don't need to be fixed in place. That's it. There's not really much more to that. And I think the way that the terms liberal and conservative have been stretched and used are simply a means to control. So help me get the word out for this show to all your friends, liberal or conservative, and let them know there is a place that they can go where experts that have real experience still speak and analyze all the issues that are going on today. The Experts podcast is for you, and you are the ones that are going to get this word out and get this to the top of the charts. Let's do it, and let's start the show.
So much data from around the country indicating that indoor dining unfortunately became a real nexus for infection.
Bullshit.
In a way that other types of economic activity weren't.
This is Jonathan Gilliam back on a Tuesday episode of the Experts Podcast. The truth has arrived. And it is great to be back with you all. As you know, I stay up the majority of the night looking and monitoring all the headlines because I just don't hardly sleep. And it's interesting. This is one of those days where the headlines just seem to be repeating day after day. And there are some things that keep sticking out a little bit. One of the things that really jumped out at me today is the fact that I was talking about yesterday about TikTok and about the whole thing with Kellyanne Conway and her daughter, how she what a brat, this kid, and how she was calling her mom and her dad out live about how they were refusing to let her exercise her First Amendment. The stupidity of these young people today. It's crazy where it's gone because of social media. And because of the Department of Education, these teachers' unions have become they've been leftist, but they have done their due diligence, and they've really, absolutely brainwashed these children, not just indoctrinated them, they've brainwashed them. And they have no concept at all about the reality and the dangers of social media. There's going to be no secrets in the future. These kids think they're going to run for office or they're going to get a job, and somebody's not going to like them, and they're going to pull stuff up, and that's going to be it for them. Careers and dreams and aspirations will be ruined. But anyway, I was looking at foxnews.com, and again, I go to all the different news sites and aggregates. And Fox News is one of them, even though I've been bashing them pretty hard, because the reality is, there's so many leftists that work behind the scenes there that it just oozes out of their stories nowadays. But what's interesting is, after talking about TikTok yesterday, Secretary of State Pompeo was on Laura Ingram's show, I believe it was, and was talking about how there may be potential restrictions of the Chinese TikTok app, because users are they're basically seeding information to a Chinese communist country. And I found that very interesting on many levels. First level is the fact that more people don't realize what's going on with TikTok. And it's not just TikTok. It's a lot of these different social media platforms for sure. But nevertheless, regardless of which platform it is, people have just blindly downloaded all these different things. I remember several years ago, there was a flashlight app that it was one of the first flashlight apps that people started putting on their phones. And as it turns out, it had spyware in it. And people were totally surprised by that. What you have to realize, folks, is that, and I learned this thoroughly. I mean, I knew this before. I'm not a stupid person, but when I was in the FBI, I definitely learned this, is that whatever technology is out there or whatever trend is flowing, bad people will jump on board and attempt to use those platforms for devious or nefarious means. And that's exactly what's happening with this social media stuff. I've talked to many teenagers who have talked about how, any teenagers now that are on social media will have someone ask them for nude photos. And a lot of the time, it's actually adults that are doing it. They're either posing as children or they're just blatantly doing it. And it doesn't seem to faze anyone. It doesn't. And I find that very disturbing. Very disturbing that not that the teenagers would be this willing to participate in stuff that's this dangerous. I mean, they're dumb, they're teenagers, and they have very little life experience, so they're going to make bad decisions. What bothers me is that there's literally no parenting when it comes to these social media applications that are on their phones, and the reality of how people are using these for nefarious reasons. Pedophiles, other weirdo teenagers and young people. I mean, it's out of control. And it, along with the leftist education sector in this nation and really around the world, the dumbing down of our youth has increased exponentially. But the other thing that's very interesting about that is at the same time they've become dumber in the way of zero common sense, zero street smarts. I mean, things happen to these young people and they're just so surprised when they're abducted or when somebody rapes them or they get assaulted. They're so surprised when these things happened. And when you look at what they've been doing on social media, when you look at their behavior, when you look at how they just freely live with no concept of the reality of how bad people actually are, the only thing I can come down to and determine is that there's zero parenting going on. None. In fact, most parents that I know literally give the phones or iPads to their children as a form of babysitting. So from a very young age, these children are literally getting comfortable with how the phone works, and they just think of it as it's just a part of their life. It's interesting because I've always thought, and I think I've mentioned this on here before, that in Genesis, that when Satan convinced Adam and Eve to eat of the apple, he knew exactly what he's doing. Jesus called him the father of all lies. So he knew exactly what would happen, that if they ate of this tree of the knowledge of good and evil, they would surely die. That's what God told him. And he told him it was a lie. Of course, he was lying. And God said, if you eat of that tree, you'll surely die. And so when they ate of that tree, it put a series of events in motion to where mankind would, in fact, know the secrets of good and evil. But along with that, they were cast out of the Garden of Eden, never to eat the tree of life, although your name can be in the book of life. There's no doubt about that. And the thing that nobody ever really talks about is the fact that Satan himself didn't eat of that apple. He convinced them to do it, and he was cast out along with them. I believe that he understood that this would occur and that he would be able to use the human beings, similar to the Matrix where the machines use the people as batteries. Satan himself would use human beings as his supercomputers because they would learn. They would learn more and more, and because they're open to good and evil, they would, the full ramifications of what happens when you do good and what happens when you do bad, and knowledge in general. And like any narcissist that manipulates people and works in this with trickery and lies, what they will do is when they gain this knowledge, it's not like they're going to make things better. They're going to use it for power. And now you may not be a Christian that's listening to this. You may not be religious at all. But I really think you should consider this, because when you look at the way things are going now, and you look at the way social media and phones and computers are and how they're used and utilized, you have to realize that, one, you have no clue who's listening, who's watching. You have no clue. Yeah, you may be talking to that person, but the reality is you have no clue on what's going on in the background, on who's actually participating in watching that. I don't care if they say it's encrypted or whatever. You have no clue. And when you think about that, the reality of that, because remember, this is important. This is very important. If you don't get anything out of this show today except for this, you need to remember this, and it needs to sit in your brain and just fester in your brain, okay? When I was in the FBI and we were looking for information on someone that, in regards to telephones or social media or computers, we didn't turn to the NSA where everybody's all freaked out because the NSA collects this information or that information. We went and got subpoenas to the phone companies or to the cable companies. We didn't turn to the NSA. These different companies, private companies, have all of that information. There's no need to go to the NSA and collect that stuff. You know, unknowingly or not even caring, give all that information. You think that cable companies or your internet access provider does not keep a record of everything that you look at on your computer? How do you think that these things, you know, you look something up on your computer and then you go to Instagram and there's a commercial about it on Instagram? I remember one time, this is no exaggeration whatsoever, I was talking to somebody because I'd had a cold. I didn't even look it up. I was just talking to somebody about how Vicks Vapor Rub, you know, I put that in my nose, and how my grandma used to put it in my nose when I was a kid, and my mom, and on your chest. And I go to Instagram, which is primarily a narcissistic type of platform. Very little words, all pictures. Notice me, notice me. And I'm posted something, and I scroll through some of the pictures, and I kid you not, a commercial for Vicks Vapor Rub came up on Instagram. Like, this is like 5 minutes after I had this conversation. Now, I've never seen Vicks Vapor Rub advertised on Instagram since, and it happened within 5 minutes of having that conversation. And that just kind of alerted me to the fact that other people, and it reminded me of what I had learned before, that it's most likely somebody else is listening to and watching what we do. OnStar. You have OnStar in your car. You know, OnStar, you push a button and it activates it, but do you realize that it's not being activated by you, it's being activated by the company. You send a cellular signal out and the company turns it on. Well, the company can turn it on anytime, and anybody has access to that can turn it on. So this stuff should sit in your brain, and you should realize that if there is an entity out there that has at the top echelon control of power, and I hope that you're seeing when you watch the news and you see the way politics and celebrities and all these people, how it works. It's not like a straight line where this person over there is a celebrity and they feel this way, and way over down on this part of the line, there's a politician and they're saying this thing, and they just happen to, hey, like on a train station, the two tallest people can see each other and they're waving at each other. That's not the way this whole system works. There's a hierarchy. And I've talked about it numerous times on television and radio and on my podcast about the family tree that these people belong to, these leftists and criminals. I mean, there's different family trees, but in particular, the communist leftist family tree, which is very demonic. And when you look at how it works, for instance, go right now to Twitter and say something on Bubba Wallace's feed or NASCAR's feed. NASCAR is a perfect example. NASCAR, since it began until this year, was basically, I don't want to call it a good old boy sport, but there was a very specific type of people, even though it's the biggest spectator sport in the world, or at least it was, and it has the longest season of any sports. Goes basically from January, February, all the way through to the end of October almost. And there's not, I can't say that there's people all around the world who love to hear loud cars, smell oil burning, and feel the vibration and the wind of this stuff when it goes by. Sounds exhilarating when I explain it, but you ask most people, are you interested in NASCAR? They would say no, unless they were really into racing. But I would have to say, by and large, it was a very conservative group of people because it originated in the South, where it's predominantly more conservative than in these northern and especially northeastern big cities, or on the coast, the littoral regions, very liberal. Why is it liberal? Probably because it's more cosmopolitan, because people come there from other countries. So the flavor, I'm sure there's many more reasons than this, but the flavor of the culture is much more diverse. And then also people are living on top of each other. So it's just going to be a much more controlled environment. And so liberal versus conservative, liberals will flourish, or the liberal ideology will flourish in a city, as where in the rural regions, conservatism flourishes more because people have to rely on themselves more. And they, quite frankly, don't find the reasons for things to change. People are less dependent on government, is another thing. So anyway, regardless of all this stuff, NASCAR was a very conservative fan base, had a very conservative fan base. Now, when you go on NASCAR on Twitter and you look at anything that they tweet out, it is 100% leftist trolls that are just saying the same thing over and over again. Man, I would never have thought that I'd be watching NASCAR, but in 2020, I love it. And then you look at their news feed and it's all leftist propaganda. You say something against Bubba Wallace, you're going to get attacked, just like if you said something about Nancy Pelosi or Joe Biden or Beto O'Rourke. That's how left these people are. And so when I was responding to some of Beto O'Rourke's stuff today, because this guy's a moron. I mean, he's a moron. What I realized when I'm looking at what happened to NASCAR is it's a perfect example. I know I've talked about NASCAR a couple times on this show, but it is a perfect example of how these leftists work. And now I'll get back to the other point that I was making about Satan earlier, but this has everything in the world to do with this, okay? When you look at NASCAR and you look at what's occurred, the reality is that it's a perfect example of how the left takes over an industry, okay? they will try to find something political. They will boycott it so that it's forced to say in certain things and cling to certain ideologies or values, as Google would call them, or other Silicon Valley companies they always have these values, that are very, very left and very and void almost completely of ethics and morals. I don't know who their master is, but I have a feeling. So anyway, they get in there and they take over an industry or a company, and then they use that for their political aim. See, NASCAR you saw earlier in the year, right before the virus and all this stuff, at the Daytona 500, the president, had the beast, his car out there. They flew Air Force One over. It was, I think, one of the most amazing and inspirational things I've ever seen a president do in our modern lives, or our modern history, where the president was involved with this massive event and just showed so much personality. It was incredible. I loved it. And so many people that I didn't talk to one person that didn't like it, because at that point earlier this year, NASCAR, their fan base was conservative. Now the virus breaks out. And then this thing with George Floyd happens, and the Black Lives Matter movement comes up and rises, and everybody that buys into it thinks it's all about Black lives and about equality and the same old stuff that you're hearing constantly from the left. Well, the reality is, as we all know, it has nothing to do with Black Lives Matter. If that was the case, if Black Lives Matter was so concerned about Black lives, they would be up in arms at all the children that were killed this weekend by Black people. It was crazy town in multiple cities, and very, very young. Well, I'm not talking like 16, 17. I'm talking very young, 8, 9-year-old children killed, shot to death by gang members, Black gang members. Now, you didn't hear anything from Black Lives Matter about that, or the New York Times or the Washington Post. You didn't hear it from anybody. What you heard was stuff about the lady in Central Park who called 911 on a Black guy earlier this year because she felt threatened by him. That was the story. That they talked about that more than they didn't even mention the kids getting killed really at all. And Black Lives Matter was nowhere making statements about that. Nor was Bubba Wallace or NASCAR. They're still stuck on this, apology tour, because they're definitely not an apology tour. It's some kind of a vague virtue signaling tour. That's basically what it is. So, again, let me go over this and start from this one little point here. What's happened in NASCAR from the beginning of this year to now is a perfect example of how the left takes over an industry and then they use that for their own political aim, especially ones that are steeped in the South like NASCAR and conservatism. Then they vilify, they had this whole stunt with the noose, and people that have never heard of Bubba Wallace, for good reason, because he's never won anything. He's basically a bad driver. He doesn't finish up in the top of anything. He's just one of those cars just there to be competition for the people who are really good. All of a sudden this noose incident happens, and we know that was a complete hoax. They vilified they instantly connected that with the Confederate flag. And instantly, even Wallace, who said that he really didn't even consider the Confederate flag, he just considered the checkered flag, all of a sudden he became what he calls an activist. And he's a total, when you listen to him talk, it's total narcissism. But he considers himself an activist now, just like Kanye is considering himself to be running for president. I guess I have no clue what's going on there, what that's all about. I think he's manic. That's what I think about that. But that's a whole nother story. We'll see how that plays out. But so they take over an industry. They use it for their political aim. They vilify anybody who doesn't identify with their ideology. So they immediately turned the noose and the Confederate flag issue into the same issue, And I would even go as far to say that when the Confederate flag flew over the race that day, live on television, where a plane flew over pulling the Confederate flag, we've never heard anything about who did that. We've never heard anybody say anything about that. Until I know otherwise, I am going to speculate that that was actually done by leftists just to add to this whole, racial thing so they can vilify the fans of NASCAR and anybody that disagrees with them. And once they do that, they use troll bot farms and all these leftists on social media to drown out everybody else's voice. So now, not only have they killed the conservative love of NASCAR and people are just turning it off like crazy. And you got to ask yourself a question about this. Why would a corporation like NASCAR literally stick a knife in the heart of their advertising? Why would they do that? It doesn't make any sense to me. It goes against everything that business is about, except for the fact that leftists got to the top of that company and they just played this wave out as it rose. And so they use these bot farms on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram or anything, wherever they feel like NASCAR is being attacked or for their leftist views now, they will go and they will smother the voice. And not only smother it, if I went on Twitter and said something that was racist or called somebody a pedophile or something like that, it would go crazy with these leftist trolls. And, if somebody goes on Twitter and says something racist, they should be called on the carpet for that. But these leftist troll farms will go on there and call you racist. I mean, I've responded to something that Bubba Wallace said, and I've probably been called a racist at least 30, 40 times because I responded under Trump's tweet. And there's not a racist bone in my body. Everybody knows me, knows that. Anybody that listens to this show knows that there's no racism here, no ego, just somebody who loves their country, loves God, and wants to serve in order to ensure that freedom and the Constitution thrive. That's it. But that doesn't stop them from saying these things. And nobody will call them on the carpet because the entire system is rigged, folks, like I was talking about yesterday about Fox News. And as George Carlin said, who was a leftist himself, it's a big game, and it's a big group, and you're not in it. And it's a big game, and you're not the one in charge of it. So this is a perfect example when I look at how easily this is happening now. And then you go back and you look at TikTok and you look at social media. And you look at how not only is it controlled by the left, but it is literally an eyeball into your life. Everything that you say and do is most likely being listened to, or there's data that's being collected. I talked to somebody who worked undercover during the Obama campaign, and they were a part of the groups that would go door to door talking to different families about voting. And there's an app. This isn't anything secret. I guess it was secret then, but now the secret's out. And the left isn't the only one using this platform. But there are basically apps that you can put on your phone, and you can, you either join or somebody creates the app. And so they take this information in, whether it be off the cable box, for instance. I know that there's in the news networks, the executives will sit and watch live data that streams in that shows if a guest or an analyst or somebody on there is saying things that is resonating or is not resonating with the people watching. How many people turn the channel? How many people? I mean, it gives all kinds of information. What the household is like, because they connect all this information. How many people live in that house? Who's most likely watching this show? But these executives will watch it, and as soon as it starts trending downward as somebody's speaking, they'll pull that segment That's how closely they watch this stuff. And these applications that were used in the Obama administration when he was running for office, basically, they could walk up to a house, look on this app, and it would tell them how many people lived in the house, who they were, how old they are, what sex they are, and what their political leanings are based on what they watch and surf on the internet. Now, that should frighten you as well. But that's open source information collected by the companies, the very companies that you pay for internet service or for cable service. It's not like you're just giving them a check and they're turning your phone on like Ma Bell back in the day, and that's it. They're collecting every bit of data that you put out there about your habits. And everybody's all concerned about Facebook. It's not just Facebook. It's all the phone companies. It's the cable companies. So with that being said, and what I initially started with in this whole rant is that Pompeo is talking about TikTok and how it may be, it may come under scrutiny. Because of the amount of information that people are giving over to the Chinese communists. But I have to tell you, the more I look at the organization of all this information, how it's organized, who it feeds to, the way these movements occur, the way that young people all say the exact same thing. Troll bots on Twitter and social media say the exact same thing. Famous people say the exact same thing. Politicians say the same thing. And how it is so organized. They're not just saying the same thing. It is driving conservatism away and pushing it down, while it's making the leftist ideology to the point where they just say, I'm communist now. It's pushing that up, and it's allowing them to say and do whatever they want. You can't say, like to somebody who's black, if you're white, and say you're a racist to the black person. People will say, black people can't be racist, or you're a racist for saying that. They can say all they want because they're on the left. It doesn't matter if they're black or white or woman or man. If they're leftist, they can say whatever they want. They can do whatever they want. They're not going to get fired. There's school board leaders and principals and superintendents and teachers that are so far left, they pray for the downfall of our nation and this Constitution. They put bumper stickers on their car that support resistance and all these different movements that are going on that are communist based, and nothing happens to them. They can go on social media and they can say whatever they want about Trump, nasty as they want to be. They can say whatever they want about people. They can talk to whoever and conspire to do bad things, and nothing happens. But lo and behold, you're a conservative and you say something about Black Lives Matter, which is a communist organization that most people do not realize they're supporting. It also feeds money directly to the Democrat Party, which most people don't even realize. And I really don't think most people on the left even care. And because you're conservative, you are going to be vilified. You lose your job, possibly be shunned from ever having a position in media again. And that's the way this thing is ran. But when you look at all this information and all of this control, I can't help but think that it's all going up like a pyramid to a specific point and entity. Now, I know this sounds, I don't really know if anybody else talks like this on their podcasts. They definitely don't in media. But I don't know if you're religious or not, but you have to sit back and realize that whoever controls this information, they control a lot. And I do believe that there will eventually be evidence that comes out that says that Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell and whoever else was working with them were, in fact, a part of this hierarchy. Whether or not that ever comes out, I don't know, but I could clearly see that. Just look at the world leaders who have been seen with this individual on their island that were on the manifest and that potentially could have been jammed up to the point where they would have to do what they say. I can't help but think that there is a hierarchy here. And when, from my experience and the amount of information that, and the way it flows into the civilian private sector, points to me from an investigative standpoint that there must be organization. There must be organization behind where the information flows and how it's used, how it's disseminated. And it's not just random. People don't just, by the millions, don't just say the same stupid thing. Like these troll bots on Twitter and social media. They don't just feel, it's not that they're just saying things. You talk to the people that are very far left, and the outrageous nonsense that comes out of their mouths is like listening to a programmed computer that was programmed to say ridiculous and nasty things. And I don't find that, from an investigative standpoint, something that just happens, that these people just developed this concept of reality on their own. I don't believe it. And I don't think that you're going to find it in any other aspect. Organized religion is a perfect example of how this works. Organized religion, there's many different aspects of Christianity, of Judaism, of Islam, where it is all about control. That is it. And it has been used, religion has been used throughout mankind in order to control people, but it's in fact organized. And I don't care if it's a small cult or a large community. There's a structure in the way that it works, in the way the hierarchy is determined and how it functions. And when you look at how all this stuff manifested, the way that the movements work, the way that they just appear. I mean, have you ever tried to organize a rally? Have you ever tried to organize a party? Just a party. It's damn near impossible sometimes because you're dealing with money and massive amounts of people. You know, I've been the best man in so many weddings. It's ridiculous. And it's a pain in the rear. But yet somehow, in an instant, protests are able to just pop up all around the country, or all around the world, fully funded, very organized, water being handed out, medics. You ever listen to these things where somebody gets hurt and they're screaming, get a medic, get a medic? Their responses are not made, they're not made up in the moment. These are trained responses. So I want you to think about that. And that's what just popped out of me as I'm looking at all this stuff. And as I was on Twitter today and seeing how the reaction was with NASCAR, it just popped out of me. And it's something that I've been thinking about for the longest time. And I've talked about before. But it's interesting because Satan in the Garden of Eden, which nobody really ever talks about, it just did not eat of this apple, but insisted that we did. And I don't think, from an investigative standpoint, that he just did that so that we could be bad in the eyes of God. Nefarious liars always have a purpose and reason for what they're doing. It's, quite frankly, normally to get energy, but also it's to carry out their plan. And I think when you look at what's occurring, there is a plan that's being carried out that's been happening for thousands and thousands of years since the fall of man. And although Satan is not all-knowing, whoever's at the top of this media collection and information collection knows a lot that happens all the time. Now, I want you to think about that. Let's take a break, and we'll come back, and then I'm going to cover a couple other things. We'll be right back. How many of you out there have a concealed weapons carry permit? And how many of you with those permits have ever thought about where you would have to use that weapon, when you would have to draw it and defend yourself against an imminent threat of loss of life or serious bodily injury? Well, if you haven't considered that and actually trained for it in your mind, you're not qualified to be carrying that weapon. You see, in the SEAL teams and in law enforcement, all these different avenues in which I've served, that is one of the main things that we go over again and again. Where would you have to use it, and what are your rules of engagement before you actually use it? What has to happen? Now, you don't have to be a concealed weapons carry permitted person. You could just be somebody who has a family. You could be somebody who is single and lives in a high rise in one of these cities where just it's going crazy right now. The fact is, if you have not realized that you can make educated predictions of who would attack you, why they would attack you, where and when it would happen, and how it would be carried out, you need to realize that that can actually occur. You can actually forward think these things, but you have to have a skill set. Sheep Know More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival is a book, a best-selling book that I wrote that teaches you how attackers look at you, and it shows you how to use that knowledge to target yourself in every aspect of your life, and then turn around and build better defenses based on awareness of who, why, where, when, and how you would be attacked. Sheep Know More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival. I've got 2 workbooks that go with it. Go check them out, folks. I'm telling you right now, this is not just a commercial. This is an offer for you to get the best type of awareness and training that you could possibly have. It's available anywhere books are sold. Amazon, Barnes & Noble. It's out there. Order it. Go get it. Give me your feedback. And if you have questions, you can always reach me on social media, and I'll answer those questions for you. Sheep Know More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival. And let's get back to the show. All right. Now I want to cover this real quick, and then I'll let you go enjoy your Tuesday. But I think it's very interesting how no one is still mentioning the reality of these protests and how dangerous, if the virus is really dangerous, okay, which I have my own theory on that, and I'll share that right now. But they keep talking about how dangerous this virus is, all these mayors and governors, but yet they're not doing anything to stop the things that are right now that are happening, where more people are showing up on a weekly basis than anything else, and that's a protest. And the soundbite that I played at the beginning of this show, I don't know if you could hear me in the background when I yelled bullshit, is Big Bird. I don't even want to call him Big Bird. He's an idiot. Mayor de Blasio in New York City. He's systematically ruined New York City. Over 500,000 people have left the city. I'm one of them, because it's turning into a nightmare there. But listen to what he says. I'm going to play the soundbite again. And yes, you can hear me yell in the background, but listen to what he says and the stupidity of what this guy is saying.
So much data from around the country indicating that indoor dining, unfortunately, became a real nexus for infection.
Bullshit. Okay, before I play the rest of it, I don't know if you ever watched the movie Step Brothers with Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly, where they were talking about how, because they made bunk beds out of these king-size beds, basically, and they said that they have so much more room for activities, so much more room for activities. That is exactly what de Blasio sounds like in this soundbite. Let me play it. It's as if one of those 2 guys from Step Brothers, those characters, got a position as a mayor of the biggest city in the country. Listen.
So much data from around the country indicating that indoor dining, unfortunately, became a real nexus for infection. Bullshit. In a way that other types of economic activity weren't.
So he's downplaying protests and saying that people eating indoors has caused the spread of this virus. Now, here's my thing. I listened to the mayor of Miami on Fox News today, and I really like that guy. I think he's a straight shooter, and he's got a good head on his shoulders. And I think that the reality is, I think you can look at the evidence here. basically, we don't know what most of the evidence is because it's a bunch of scam artists that are running the nation and all these different states, and they're utilizing the real data for a political reason, either to ruin Trump or to make themselves look more important than they are. And basically, many of them have no clue on what they're doing at all, period. They're just totally lost in this entire thing. So when you look at New York City or New York State, and you look at the number of people that have actually died from the virus, and then look at it nationwide, and I've talked about this several times, well over 50,000 people in the nation have died that were elderly. And at the same time, in New York State, a great number of in fact, it's a pretty high number. I don't know if it's half, but it's close to half of the people that have been killed or by the virus in this state have been because COVID positive patients were put into elderly clinics. Many of the people that died were only there for a couple of weeks getting something worked on. It's not like they live there. And this happened around the country. So over 50,000, we've had now 130,000 that have died from the virus, and millions that have caught it around the world. And so they're going off of this number, and they're trying, or at least they're saying they're trying, to basically attack it through prevention by not letting people go out and do things. But yet when we look at the reality of the death rate, it's not as high as they're saying, because the majority of people, or a large majority of people that have died have been elderly, and a large number of those people were elderly that were in clinics where these positive patients were put, which is the stupidest thing. I can't even understand how they came about this. Of course, New York investigated itself, and they determined there was no way to avoid it, that most likely those people died not because COVID positive patients were put in there, but because workers or people brought it in, right? That's what they say. Even though they have no proof of that, that's what they say. And that's a conclusion that they came to, so that Cuomo and the rest of the idiots in this state won't be prosecuted, which they should be. I think they should get the death penalty for murder. That's honestly the way I feel about it. But when we look at the nation, we look at these other states like Florida, the death rate is not like it is in New York City and these other big metropolitan or states that have these big metropolitan cities where they actually put these COVID positive patients in with the elderly people. The fact is, Florida is one of the largest retirement populations in the country. But yet the majority of people who are catching the virus down there are young people. And when I say young, I would say my age and below that are because they really didn't clamp down on it to begin with. I mean, they did clamp down on it, but not to the extent that they have here in New York and other places that are ran by liberals. So basically, when we look at how the left has approached this, is that they've looked at it in a way, at least is what they're telling us, to prevent. We're going to try to stop the spread through prevention. We're going to try to make sure that people don't get it through prevention. And how do they prevent that? By making people stay at home, closing restaurants, making people wear masks, none of which we're finding, actually does anything. But yet the protests can happen where hundreds of thousands of people are out there sweating, yelling, screaming, wearing masks with their nose sticking out or not wearing masks at all. And nothing is said. Nothing is said. And there's no correlation there. They're not making a correlation. So here's what I think should happen. I think that we should protect the elderly at all costs. And it should be funded where we protect the elderly. We come up with programs all around the nation to ensure that not only they are isolated, but that they're not isolated, that they're isolated from the virus, but they're not isolated in the way where they can't see people. Look, if you have an elderly person that lives in your home or in these elderly clinics, they should set up a room just like a prison, where I'm not saying they should be in a prison, but like in a prison where you have to come to the glass and you can see each other and talk over a phone or whatever, at least have something set up where people can go and see the elderly people that live in these homes face to face and give them some joy, but at the same time have a barrier there where they can't get sick in case they do. Or look, if it really comes down to it and people that really want to see their loved ones, open a shower facility in there where people can go in, shower, put on gowns, and then go and see them, and then come back, put on their street clothes and leave and throw away those gowns. See, that's where we should be spending our money and our resources to do that. And then let everybody else do whatever they want. And the people that will die. And the people that will catch it. But the vast majority, as we have seen, will not die. And of the people that have caught it, most will get over it. And in many cases will have immunity. Now, some guy's coming on Fox News saying that, he's an expert and whatever. I don't know how he's an expert in this virus because it's only been around for a couple months, but he's saying that immunity is only short-lived and it's not, and not everybody's going to get it. There's no proof of that. There's absolutely no proof of that. No long-term proof. But he's going to come on and say that as though he has long-term proof. So that's my take. And when I say, those people who get it will get it and those who will die. The fact is, if we protect the people who are most likely to die from it and give everybody else the choice, if you want to go out, you can go out. If you want to work, you can work. If you want to take the risk, take the risk. And then encourage people who test positive or who don't feel good to wear a mask. Those are the people that should be wearing a mask. But none of that's being done. But that's my take on it. And I'm not even a doctor. I'm just somebody who sits back and looks at the reality. I investigate it and I look at it and I come up with a conclusion based on the evidence that's presented in front of me and the totality of the circumstances. It does not seem as if anyone in charge is doing that. And I mean anyone, even the president. I don't believe, because it's not that he may not have thought of this. I mean, I think he's a very bright individual surrounded by people that I don't think are as bright as he is. But it's an election year, and the people that are making a lot of, I wouldn't say the decisions, but that have the influence are people that have to do with the campaign. And I quite frankly think that the president, if he gets reelected in November, it's going to be because of the same reason why he got elected in the first place, is because he talks to the people and makes sense, not because he avoids problems. And I quite frankly, if he came out and said what I just said, I'd be like, at least that guy has a plan, that he's trying to think tactically and come up with a strategic plan so that we can get past or get in front of the infection. Nothing that anyone is doing at this point is going to get us in front of the infection, in front of the virus. They're just simply saying, don't go anywhere, prevent it. But it's still out there. I mean, it's not going away. So if we prevent longer like we did before, and then we go out, people are going to get it. You're going to see a rise. And then we prevent people from going out again. And so it goes down, and then we let them go out and it comes back again. The only way that I think, and I had to sit back and look at this and look at history, the only way we're going to get through this is if we either come up with a vaccine, a cure, or we just get herd immunity. And the way that has to happen is a lot of people in an area have to get it. So you protect those who are most likely to die from it, and you give everybody else the choice to open their businesses, to go enjoy those businesses and live like they would. And if they get sick, it's on them. Let us, just like I'm watching these videos, and I was on Long Island, it was like a war zone out here, I was able to put a drone up and look around and see the massive amounts of fireworks. And there's videos in LA where the same thing was happening, and you could see a video from a plane where there's just everywhere, right? I didn't hear of any more than usual stories about people getting their hands blown up. I think it's time for these mini dictators, these governors and mayors, to just back off and allow the American people to be what they are, free. Let us have the responsibility on our own shoulders of whether or not we go to the beach or open up a restaurant or go and eat at a restaurant. I mean, the fact is, the bulk of elderly people that have died in number have been because of the stupid, idiotic, murderous decisions that these governors and mayors have made to put COVID positive patients into these elderly clinics. And the rest of us, listen, there is no virus cure. There is no vaccine. The only way we're going to get past this is if we get in front of the virus, and the only way that's going to happen is if we let people make their own decisions. I'm Jonathan Gilliam. This is The Experts. The truth has arrived. Peace. And we're out of here. How many of you are sick and tired of being censored on social media? It doesn't matter if it's Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, you're going to get censored, especially if you're conservative, and your information is going to be collected, sold. We all know what's going on. It's no surprise. And people are looking for places to go. Well, check it out. ConnectZing.com was created by my good buddy Drago. You can listen to episode number 2 of this podcast and learn all about him. He is a Polish immigrant who was held in a socialist re-education camp, aka prison, for 3 years for being part of a Freedom Underground in Poland. He came to America when he got out. He became an American citizen and then a Navy SEAL for 20 years. You couldn't ask for somebody better than Drago to build a social media platform that gives you true freedom of speech. I don't know anyone who's been oppressed to that level personally in the United States. No one. Well, guess what? When Drago left the Navy, he became a computer programmer, and he has created this incredible social media platform that's familiar to what you've seen, but the biggest difference is the censorship not going to be there. Go check it out, ConnectZing.com. It's one word, ConnectZing. Go check it out. Zing me. You can look me up. I'll be on there. And all my friends that are coming from Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, they'll all be there as well. ConnectZing.com.